Hey guys, so let's talk a little bit about beginner programming, and let's talk about specifically what I believe to be the best, all things considered, programming language to start with. Now, I made several videos and knew about this topic and something very adjacent to it, and so maybe you already know the answer. But let's walk down my experiences when I first started doing programming. And I will tell you about a little bit about that journey and kind of what I figured out on my own over the years. And so when I first wanted to be a programmer, I did what I suppose a lot of people would do. I went out on the internet. I started looking for, I Googled for, of course, I Googled for best beginner programming language, and I got a ton of results and all different various options. And the most common thing I got I was told was that it depends on what you want to do. And after a lot of searching, I kind of landed in Python as the more or less definitive best beginner programming language. And the reason that was stated to me, what I gathered, was that why Python was the best beginner programming language was because it enforced syntax, and that was something that was it had a simple syntax, and it enforced it. In other words, it formatted it by default, by practice basically. Python will not allow you to run the scripts through the interpreter without having you making sure that you have proper formatting, so that you can write nice and clean code and so forth. That was the idea basically. So I started doing Python programming, and I took a few courses, and I could get down the basics of it, and I could start to produce fairly some type of, you just put this in context. I mean, we're talking about a few weeks of work here, but I felt that I could understand how programming worked using Python. Now, I started then looking into into Java, and most of my education was based on Java. And then I had a bout with PHP as well. PHP was also one of those languages that people told me was really easy to start with, because making web pages, and I have to admit that it was fairly straightforward to get started with PHP very quickly. Java, not so much. I understand that it was more of an education reason that people told me that Java was a good starting language. You will learn object-oriented programming, and it's a good solid foundation to start a career on. And I have to admit, I absolutely agree with that. Java is a really good, strong first language language that you should. I mean, if you're looking to get to be a professional programmer, I think Java should be somewhere in there, or C#, because those are the two dominant enterprise languages. They will give you everything you need to know in order to be a professional programmer, definitely. And then of course I did JavaScript, which was also was fairly easy to get started with. You could do it online pretty much immediately, and it's proved to be valuable very quickly, because very very quickly I realized that a lot of the stuff that programmers do is based on web development, and in web, JavaScript is almost a must. You can do it without it, but no one in their right mind would pay you maybe they would, but for the most part, you're going to need JavaScript. I think about it as if you wanted to launch your own series of phones, your own brand of mobile phones. In theory, you could make a living off of selling phones that didn't have texting support, but odds are that you won't. And it's the same thing. You can do web development without JavaScript, but odds are that nobody's going to want what you're producing. Anyway, these were the beginner languages that I was introduced to, and from what I can from my personal experience, being one of those people who kind of go broad as quickly as possible. I want to learn all the things, and I go and I research and I figure out and I experiment and I try around with a lot of stuff. And now, a few years later, what I can tell you is that if I were to go back and tell myself something that, about something to myself, that you should start with this, Frederick. These things here, you're gonna learn them, trust me, because you're one of those people who learn one thing and feel that you're getting good at it, and then you start with the next thing because, hey, something shiny is over there as well, and you want to figure that out. But if you need to start somewhere, you should start with JavaScript, and I'll tell you why. JavaScript is, when we talk about syntax and stuff like that, like Python is really good at that, it is not so much of an issue. The JavaScript is a very, very small language. It's very, very, very easy for you to get started. It's very easy for you to find help and resources, and you'll get there very quickly. And on top of that, it can give you basically anything you want. I mean, if you want to transition from JavaScript into almost anything else, you can. It's going to give you a really strong, good foundation. Now, the reason why, like, one of the strongest arguments I have that is not going to be a complete copy-paste of what I've already talked about in a previous video is that regardless of what language you pick, unless you don't want to do any type of web work, and I assume that you won't, because most people want to do something on the web for the most part. Most people who are programming or want to be programmers want to be able to make a web page or something like that, at least. And that's then the fact of the matter is that regardless of what language you start with, if it's PHP, Java, C#, Ruby, Python, like whatever you start with, you're gonna have to learn JavaScript as well. It's a fact. You're gonna have to do it. You are by default going to have to learn 2 languages. And maybe that's okay. I mean, maybe you really want to learn Elixir, for example, and you're okay with not knowing, learning JavaScript as well to be able to work with Elixir and JavaScript. But if you want to get started quickly, by just learning JavaScript, you will be able to do all that. You can learn only JavaScript, or you can learn something plus JavaScript. JavaScript is always going to be there. I can tell you from, like, I have been working as a programmer for several years now. All of it, like, where everybody, people are, of course, very, very in various ways skilled with JavaScript. Like, some of us know a lot of it, some of us don't know so much, but we all have to deal with it. Like, everybody needs to, like, you almost have to know it in order to work on the web. So that's my suggestion. If I were to give any advice to my younger self, that would be the advice. Like, start with JavaScript. Just learn that first, because it's going to take you give you most of what you want, and it's also hard. I'm going to go out and say it. It is a hard requirement for you to know JavaScript as a web developer today. So to me, it makes a lot of sense to make that your first starting language, since it will give you everything, almost everything you could possibly want to do. And any other choice you make is going to have to include JavaScript anyway. So to me, that's a pretty good argument to at least give it a try